Okay, so this is the video which is practical but not in a way you expect. So this is a video about how I was essentially back in the day full of shit. And I will explain how I was full of shit and how I went to all of those realizations, which essentially helped me to understand how I was full of shit for essentially 9 years of my occult practice. So the thing is that I was constantly seeking for excuses for my problems outside of myself. I was constantly seeking excuses for my adversities, tribulations, trials. Sometimes it was spirits, sometimes it was nerves, sometimes it was genetics, sometimes it was society, sometimes it was too much Coca-Cola, sometimes it was all kinds of things, you know? I was desperately searching for excuses, even subconsciously. And there was one entity who was calling me out on my bullshit for 3 years now, and I finally understand what it was all about. So, I was working with the Hindu goddess Kali for a really long time, and what she was always saying, because I had those weird anger temper tantrums, uh, and it was a big problem for me in my life, my anger and different emotional tantrums I had, especially in my relationships with women. That was extremely prevalent. And Kali was always telling me literally this phrase. Okay? So she was telling me this. Okay? You feel your emotion. Okay? She was telling me, you feel anger. Right? And so she would tell me to do something and the anger would dissipate. Right? And I was performing her experiments according to her instructions really long time, but I didn't understood the point of those experiments. I didn't understood the necessity of understanding what the force of Kali was trying to tell me. So what she was fundamentally trying to say is that your emotions are simply the products of your consciousness, just like any other aspect of your experience. You have certain hormones running through your body, you have certain thoughts, and thoughts with union with hormones produce emotions. And let me give you a really practical example to that. For example, you are depressed, right? Then somebody all of a sudden runs through you and punches you in the face, and you see a attacker in front of you. In your system, adrenaline immediately produces and you are not depressed anymore. You are thinking about how to avoid goddamn next punch. It happened to me a lot of the time. I would be really depressed or something. I would walk down the street, and because my ability to hold balance while walking is relatively not good because of my lifestyle choices in the past, I would fall really badly. And sometimes I would endanger myself, you know? Sometimes I would walk weirdly in front of the cars and I would see a car running towards me and I would not be able to stop at time. And I would literally create, you know, a problem for myself because if car hits me, I am dead or I break my bones, right? And in that moment where I see car approaching, my depression would immediately stop and adrenaline will be produced in the brain. And depression would immediately dissipate. And sometimes adrenaline would be so high that I wouldn't be depressed for hours on end. Because, you know, you have adrenaline, a hormone of survival running through your body. Right? So emotions are 100% products of your hormones and thoughts. Right? They are product of consciousness. They are reaction to your experience. And what your experience contains of. So your experience, from how I understand it, is comprised of 3 levels: your observations, your emotions, and your thoughts. Right? So we all know that our brain produces the thoughts in our head. That's not a stretch. Now we can understand how we are responsible for our emotions. Our emotions are a mix of our thoughts and hormonal responses, right? And then you have our observations, which is the third component in our human experience, right? So observation can be sound, it can be light, that's vision, it can be sound, that's hearing, it can be touch, that's tactile sensation. So our observations is what we experience, right? Our perceived experience of outside world is our observations. However, there is a problem with that, right? There is a problem with that. So essentially, every single thing you observe is filtered through your senses. It's filtered through your eyes, ears, and tactile sensations, through your taste, and through your sense of orientation, right? So everything you experience is filtered through those five. And the thing is, you have no evidence to prove that the things exist in a way you observe them, right? Now, people would say there are other individuals which essentially experience the same thing I do. But it literally doesn't mean anything. Because how many times you had millions and millions of people experiencing something and then you figure out that it's not necessarily what happened. So multiple people testing and experiencing certain observation doesn't mean that observation is real. From a philosophical standpoint, there is no way you can prove that your observation is real. Because it doesn't matter what you observe, it's always filtered through your senses. And you can never check with 100% certainty. It doesn't matter how much people share it. It doesn't matter how consistently you experience it, that your observation is real. Because your observation, by definition, has certain limitations. And it cannot grasp the total picture of things. It doesn't matter how much effort you invest. You cannot absolutely prove that your observation is real. And I will give you a thought experiment, okay? So, sit in a dark room and think about blue ball going to a trance state, right? And think about blue ball radiating in front of you in a dark room. If you go in a trance state and you think about black ball, not black ball, but the blue ball of light, long enough, right? You will start seeing it. You can literally manipulate every single sense you have with the power of your mind in this manner. You can turn off the pain sensations. It's possible. You can turn off the pain. This is something which was kind of done by multiple people. You can use the power of your mind to manipulate every single sense you have. And because of the fact that our senses can be so easily manipulated, and they can create false impressions so easily, it doesn't matter how many people observe something. It doesn't make it 100% true. Actually, if you really want to be honest with yourself, objective reality is a lie we all agree upon. So the only reason why something is considered objective is because we all agree upon it. Right? So let me give you an example. In a modern world, it's an objective reality for majority of the population in Western urban societies that there is like 50 genders. The only reason why it's real is because majority of people agree upon it. 1,000 years ago, that wasn't real, so nobody would tell you that 50 genders are real. And we can use the genders example to essentially question and come to the conclusion that majority of the times when we say that something is real, it simply means that majority of people agree upon it. The fact of the matter that majority of people agree on something doesn't do anything, right? Because there is no way you can prove that your observation is true, because there is no way you can observe the world outside of your senses. Everything you perceive through your senses. So people would say, you can turn on the camera and you can see what is kind of recorded on the camera. And I would say, motherfucker, you are watching a YouTube video through your senses. YouTube video you are watching is still processed, and your observation of the YouTube video is product of your senses. That's the reason why whatever blind person sees is fucking black, right? Because they don't have the ability to process color, and so everything is black to them. So color doesn't exist to them. What exists to them is a tactile sensations, which they kind of use to essentially, replace the fact that I cannot observe color. But color doesn't exist for them because they are blind, right? Everything is black for them, and everything is black in their observation because they cannot perceive color, right? So fundamentally, everything you see, your entire experience, is product of you. And once you understand that everything you experience is product of you as a conscious being, and that there is no way you can objectively prove a reality outside of your observation, because everything your consciousness comes in contact with is processed by the consciousness, then thing you have to really go into your mind is that you are responsible for 90.9.9.9 things which happen to you. Now, people in the comment section, I know you guys, you will usually bring some really controversial examples which have to deal with sexuality, and you will say, are those people responsible for what happened to them? And the thing is, I have a philosophical answer to that, and I also incorporate my own experience into that answer. But the reason I will never comment on that on YouTube probably, but I will probably comment on that on Patreon, is because I don't want to be banned. Because people are retarded, If I say my actual opinion, people will report the video. So, yeah. This is kind of what I learned through my work with Kali. And this is essentially, actually, to be much more precise, this is my interpretation of my experience with Kali. Maybe some people will interpret experience differently, right? But this is something I needed to tell you guys. And also, back in the day, I talked about depression a lot. I talked about how I had the problem with depression for a really long time, and I was really big on how I have mental health issues and this problem and that problem and this and that. And right now I am 100% firmly convinced that it was bullshit. And from there comes the title of this video, which is I was full of shit. I was full of shit because I refused to accept that my depression was product of my thoughts and my hormonal patterns, which can be changed through discipline, lifestyle changes, and meditations which teach you how to control your mind. And I am not guaranteeing that my techniques will work for other people, because other people govern their own mind, emotions, and observations. And if they don't manage to govern them in the same way I did, then my techniques will not be necessarily as effective for them as they were for me. But fundamentally, I think that my thought and my talk about depression was really bullshit back in the day, and I think it was really inappropriate for somebody who claims to be occultist to find excuses in the way I found them in the past. And yeah, I was full of shit, and I retract my previous statements about depression and mental health, and also many other things I said. So, what I also have to say to you people is, I don't agree with a lot of things I said in my older videos, because my opinions changed over time, my observations changed over time, my emotions changed over time, and I have more control over the entire process than I had before. So, the only reason why you are able to watch my old videos is because I am not a hypocrite. I don't want to remove my content from my channel just because I think what I said 5 years ago is full of shit. I will leave it on the internet anyway, because people deserve to kind of see my progression through time. And recently I published a video about Belial and animal sacrifice, and a lot of people disagreed. I honestly don't give a fuck. Your disagreement, motherfucker, is your problem. So you have thought in your head, an emotion in your head, which is negative in regard to your observation of my words. I don't give a fuck. Right? Okay. And that's kind of everything I want to say. So I was full of shit, and I regret and retract my previous statements about depression. I completely believe that I was responsible for fucking up my hormonal patterns and fucking up my mental state through bad lifestyle choices, which made me depressed. And I retract any statement which claims that my spiritual path was responsible for my mental issues, because my mental issues were my responsibility. And I think I misinformed back in the day a lot of you guys by essentially telling you how my spiritual path was responsible for perceived mental issues I had. Now I retract many of those statements, and I consider them inaccurate. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.